with any stack. I think I just want to like back up and sort of like talk about maybe the meta of what I'm seeing, which is when you don't own your stack and your stack owns you, you can make a mess in any stack. Because performance and good experiences in general are on the other side of mastery. When you have mastered your stack, you can make a good experience in all these dimensions, right? Accessibility, performance, security, privacy, usability, coherence of your design language. When you master your stack, you can make a good experience with pretty much anything. So I've seen incredible teams take React and do extremely impressive work under really tight conditions, right? So here's my internet connection. Like maybe there was something wrong with the computer. There will be a series of conversations that start to scroll, and someone with some actual power will start to notice sites because I don't want to punch down at teams, but I will post traces of public sector sites, and what I'm seeing a lot of there is regression about critical public services, things that people in need to get the stuff that they're owed by the government. And as a sort of, I think, pressurized environment that you're describing, where you have to get something out the door and iterate on it quickly, but you're in that learning mode, you've got a little bit more time, you'd like to understand how things work. First, there's a whole series of YouTube posts, YouTube playlists from something called Chromium University. Chromium University is the training that we give Chromium developers, the folks who show up to work on Edge or Chrome or Opera.
For my experience with those, they're much more targeted at like existing developers and like learning the ways of Chromium. I'm talking for like someone who's programmed before. A lot of them start with React, and I think it's a great starting point.
I just want to like get the end of my rant. Sorry. So there's one called Life of a Pixel. I would not expect anyone to understand it all up. Not even a web developer to understand it all up. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's like C++ level. Gavin will get it. I don't know who else in the room would. The pastiche you take away from it is an understanding of the pipeline. And there's some great draw explainers from Mariko Kosaka that outline basically the internals of how browsers work. You don't have to be a programmer really to understand those. They give you the basic building blocks and they describe the phases of the system. And then from there, I would start with some of these CSS tutorials, and then advanced HTML tutorials, advanced forms stuff that you can do now, and I would go to some web components, and then I would pick up a framework. Because from there, you can understand which problems the framework solves. And until you start from the basis of like, here's what my HTML does, oh my gosh, I can't do this. The power you're describing of like, it opens up this whole new world, it'll still be there. That power will still be available to you. But you can then pick up a framework and go, oh, I like this about it, I don't like that about it. You don't get trapped in the high complexity tower from which you are afraid to fall.
Should you be able to watch Life of a Pixel and not feel like a real...
But when we build service workers, one of the goals there for websites was to ensure that we were able to do a better job about only calling the div, right? And one of the things I'm most optimistic about now is the idea of some of the things that I'm starting to see about people doing templating inside their service workers, pulling diffs in a more distributed computing style way, things like YJS, where we start to have a local data model that's offline, external data model, or replicache. Some of those tools are starting to make it possible for us to think about occasionally connecting clients to be first-class citizens. It's going to require us to do a much better job as a community about the integrity and versioning of our data models. We're going to have to start thinking a little bit more like app developers, but I welcome that a lot. I think that's going to be potentially quite important. And there's a role for browsers to play that we're not playing yet to help users better understand how developers are doing about that. You can have that in a dozen flavors today. You can have that from lib, you can have that from Svelte, you can have that from Vue, you can have that from Stencil, you can have that from Fast, you can have that from, just like, it just goes on and on and on and on. You can have that same core thing that you're talking about in a dozen different, slightly flavored packages. So my answer would be, pick one that has lower structural costs, right? But only pick one of these things that's going to do this work on the client side when you have to maintain a local data model. Which is to say, not most of the time. For most sessions, most of the time, the session depth won't justify it. So you're gonna be using static HTML for a product marketing landing page. You're gonna do some CSS dancing, and maybe you get to something that's like more like a configure, not quite a configurator, but you're gonna be doing something that's like, part of a larger flow. In that case, you probably just want some progressive enhancement because the data model is gonna live on the server the whole time. The set of use cases where you're gonna have a fully local data model that you're gonna be performing synchronization on, that's the argument space here. That's the only place that we're arguing over. Everything else should be sending HTML and maybe upgrading with a little bit of JavaScript. And so in this specific category, take a bunch, but generally, for most classes of experiences, don't take any. Capabilities available to you on the web, mostly through JavaScript, right? Like, I've got some anti-JavaScript club stickers. You're all welcome to one if you want them. But they come from a place of love, right? Like, I am here as a maximalist for the web platform. I believe that the web should be how most experiences are delivered to most computers most of the time. And that's why we work on PWAs, right? So where are we going with this? Well, there's an adjacent possible. There's a set of things that you can do with the web today, and that, when we push it out a little bit, uncovers the next thing that we could do if we only knew how to get there safely. And that safety is kind of usually the thing. And so with WebGL, right, the next thing is WebGPU. And then we're going to get better at unpacking models for AR experiences, because right now you have to pull your own GLTF decoder down the wire with you, which sucks because it often tends to run on the main thread. So we need to do that off thread, and we need to get better about decoding these textures in a way that's not going to continue to peg you. There's a whole set of things depending on your area that are going to all add up. The only reason that I'm here talking to you tonight about performance and this sort of thing about React is that we got stuck in a local minimum. Like we got stuck in a trough arguing about component models when that's not the least interesting thing. And so you have the React doesn't play well with web components. That's not true. React doesn't play well with DOM. Like React just doesn't understand how to do DOM good. So what year will React DOM good is, I think, a really interesting question, because it's going to unlock some important advances for the community where we stop putting all of our eggs in one basket. We don't have a totalizing view of the entire tree. We can start to replace parts with little bits that are more portable, that are more composable, that don't have such a high tax rate associated with them, so they're not so afraid of composing them together, right? Like, one of the downsides of this kind of totalizing worldview of this there is a meta framework that owns the whole kind of root of the page and everything below it, is that we lose composability. So web components will unlock some more composability. Whenever React pulls into the station with a DOM that is like not fundamentally broken, I've got a lot of hope. Joey at Google has put a bunch of work in. Why is it from React 18? I don't know, but it should hopefully land React 19. You can use the experimental branch now. Every web components library worth its salt, including the FAST team and the Stencil and the lit folks, all generate React bindings because the squeaky wheel is always getting greased. So you can